Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode here at Electrical Code Academy, where we teach you the National Electrical Code. My name is Paul Abernathy, and I'm your host for today's little training session. And we're going to be looking at 3 questions that frequently appear in some form or fashion on an electrical exam. And I want to make sure that you understand how to calculate them out. And so whether they change any of the variables in the question, I want you to be able to calculate it out and dissect the question. So I'm going to give you some guidelines here for today's video. When we get the question, what I want you to do is I want you to look at the question, listen to what I have to say to kind of feed you the information about the question and how to dissect it. But then I want you to pause the video and I want you to try to work the question yourself. And then you can click play and then we'll go over the answer. But the whole purpose of this video series is to be able to make sure that you look at a question, I show you how you really want to dissect it, then you try to work the question, and then I share the answer with you. Right? So I'm going to give you the tools you need to answer the question, but I really need you to interact. I need you to make sure that you have a copy of your code book, okay? And you're going to work through this with me. Sound good? All right, let's go on and get started and look at our very first question that we have. All right, so this is episode 5. We've had quite a few of these we've done in the past. They're available on our website over on Electrical Code Academy, as well as available on our YouTube channel. So we're looking at the 2020 edition of the National Electrical Code. Very soon, we'll be going to the 2023 edition of the NEC. But right now, we're still on the 2020 edition. So kind of working our way through that. All right, let's look at the very first question we have today. And it's a doozy, okay? So it's a doozy, and this is one that's going to make you have to take a few notes down and work this thing out. And don't worry, you've got your scratch paper, you've got your pen, you've got your calculator, you've got everything you need to do to work this out. And I'm going to show you how we break this down, okay? All right, so first thing, this question, let's read it. It says, one family dwelling has 6 3 kW electric wall heaters, okay, like a baseboard heaters. Each one of those are individually thermostatic controlled, so each one independently controlled. And we have 5 room air conditioners. So we have 6 3 kW heat strips, and they're each individually thermostatically controlled. And we have 5 air conditioners. Now, of these 5 air conditioners, it says 2 of those air conditioners are rated 10.5 amperes at 230 volts. And the others, which be the other 3, are rated at 7.2 amperes at 115 volts. Okay, little tip here. When you get an exam question and it tells you that it's 230 volts, use 230 volts. When they tell you it's 115, use 115. Don't let things start to creep in your mind and go, well, wouldn't that be 240? Or wouldn't that be 120? No, use what they give you. There's a reason they give it to you, and it's probably going to align with the answer in the optional choices that you have. So kind of use what they give you. All right, now it goes on to say, a service calculation is being performed using the optional method. So they'll be using the optional method to do their overall service calc. But it seems like we're only being asked to do the AC and the heat and compare the two. That's all we're being asked to look at right now. But it is reminding you that they're using the optional method, so that's going to put you in the optional area. That would be part 4 of 220, right? Okay. Says now, how many volt amperes should be included after demand factors for the heating and air conditioning? Assume heater kW ratings are equivalent to kVA. Okay, so just as kind of an educational point, kW is the same as kVA when it comes to these kind of calculations, right? Exactly the same. 1 kW would be the same as 1,000 watts, the K signifying 1,000, okay? So 3 kW is 3,000 watts, or it's also 3,000 VA, volt amperes. See how that works? So when you're working with these calculations in 220, kW is synonymous with kVA and things like that. So just kind of keep those things in mind. All right. So what you want to do is the first thing I like to do here is say, okay, we know it's an optional method. So we need to go and see what are the rules for optional methods. All right, so we're going to do that now. I'm going to take us to the code, and we're going to look at the optional method. We need some guidance. Okay, so here we're at the Article 220 at the very beginning, and I'm going to take us down to where we need to be. And as you know, we're in 220.82. Okay, now you might be asking, why are we in 220.82? Well, we are doing the optional method, so that's part 4. We wouldn't be in 220.84, in case anybody asks, because that's dealing with multifamily dwellings, okay? And we're not dealing with a multifamily dwelling. We're dealing with a single family dwelling, okay? So we're not dealing with 3 or more. We're dealing with 1. So that's why we're in here, and that's why this is titled dwelling unit, okay? All right, so what you see is it talks about feeder and service loads, and it tells us that since it's a dwelling unit, that we're going to follow this optional method if it's a 120/240 or a 208Y120. Well, we know that it was, even though it was 230 and 115, we know that the nominals are 120/240. So we know that we're dealing with a single phase 120/240. But that's not the most important part here. This thing is broken down into an A, a B, and a C. B is going to be the one that deals with the 3 VA per square foot, talks about adding up all the nameplates, the first 10,000 at 100%, and the remainder at 40%. We're not even doing any of that because we're not even looking at cooking. We're not even looking at appliances. We're not even looking at 3 VA per square foot. All we're being asked to do is deal with the heating and air conditioning, right? So we want to move on down to what we're working with in our question, and that is right here. So here we've got the heating and air conditioning, and it's broken down into 6 pieces here, okay? Now, it says the largest of the following 6 selections shall be included. Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, we're only going to use 2 of these. Obviously, one's going to deal with air conditioning, and the other is going to deal with the heat. Well, number 1 on this list says 100% of the nameplate ratings of air conditioning and cooling. Well, we already know what our air conditioning is. We had 2 of them at 10.5 amps and 3 of them at 7.2 amps. So we know what our air conditioning is. And we know our heat. There was 6 of them at 3 kW each. Okay, so we know that when it comes to the AC, we're going to take their full value at 100%. Now we need to see that heat. Now, looking down the list here, the number 2 is a heat pump. Number 3 is still talking about heat pumps. Number 4, 65%. But that's electric space heating when you have less than 4. Well, we had 6, remember? We had 6. So then we have number 5. Now, 5 says 40% of the nameplate rating of electric space heating if there's 4 or more separately controlled. Well, we had 6. So obviously, we're going to be comparing number 1 for AC versus number 5 for the heat. Okay? Now, this would be a great time for you to take a deep breath. Very, very, very much possible that you'd see something like this on an exam. Try to work it yourself. Pause the video. Work it out. And then we'll come back and I'll walk you through what you do. All right, you ready? We're going to work it out. All right, let's go back to the question. So here was our question, and we got to do a couple things in order to get there. All right, so let's go on and start working the math. Okay, first thing, let's knock that heat out. There was 6 of them. There was 3,000 watts each, okay, or 3 kW each. So we're going to work this out. So 6 times 3,000 or 6 times 3 kW, that would equal 18 kW. But in this case, it's 18,000, the way we're working it out here. Now, remember what it said? It says that we take what? We're going to take it. Now, this says 220.82C6, but it's actually, which one was it? It was 5 that we're using for the heat. Okay, so typo. So we're doing 18,000, and we're going to multiply that by 40%. And that gives us 7.2 kW, or in our case, since we worked it out in watts, it is 7,200 watts, or 7,200 VA. Now let's look at that AC. because we know that we've done the heat already, and 7,200 is what we're working with for the heat. Is that going to be greater than the AC? Well, that's what you got to work out. So remember we had 2 of them at 10.5 amps each, and we had 3 of them at 7.2 amps. So easy math. 2, because there's 2 of them, times 10.5 times 230 volts. Remember, use the voltage that's given in the question. That's going to give us 4,830 VA. Okay? Now let's do the 3 7.2 amp air conditioning units. That would be 3 times 7.2 times 115 volts. That is 2,484 volt amperes. Remember Ohm's law, in order to find VA, what we're doing is it's synonymous. We're just going amps times volts equals watts, and watts is synonymous with VA. See how that works? If you're not familiar with all the basic principles, Ohm's laws and stuff like that, and all those parallels and series, we have a great program called the Fast Tracks Yellow that really digs deep into atomic theory, series, parallel circuits, all those things you've ever asked yourself, and you're like, dude, I'd like to just take a class to learn more about the theory and the concepts of magnetism and parallels and three-phase and single-phase motors and all that. That's a great course. Great for anybody who wants to up the bar of just knowledge, just to have that water cooler knowledge, so that you can meet the other guys and gals at the water cooler and just drop some bombs on them of knowledge. That's a great program for that. It's called the Fast Tracks Yellow program. All right. So now we want to do 3 times 7.2 times 115. That's 2,484 amps. So all we're going to do is remember, we take them at 100%, right? So we're going to add the 2 together. So 4,830 plus the 2,484, add them together. That's 7,314 VA. Well, guess what? The AC is larger than the heat. In fact, it's 114 VA or watts greater for the AC over the heat. So which one wins? Obviously, the AC is going to win. So the answer is 7,314 VA or 7,314 watts. Okay, so be sensitive to how they write the question. Okay, all right. So pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Had any trouble with that one? All right, well, let's go on to the next one. All right, so the next question we're dealing with is one that's going to be asking about, looks like, electric clothes dryers. So the question is, we have a 5.4 kVA, so that's 5,400 VA, 5,400 watts, or 5.4 kW. See how that works? 240 volt electric clothes dryer will contribute blank amperes to the neutral load when calculating the service by the standard method. Okay, so we know we're in the standard method. So we know that we're going to be deep within part 3 of 220 because that's where the standard method is. We also know that this is asking about neutral contribution. So we know there's rules that have to apply to that as well. And there's a percentage of demand that we can apply to the value in order to get our contribution. But in this one, there's a little more math because we have to get this to amps, right? Okay, so this is your chance, but I'm going to walk you through the different code sections. Then we'll let you answer this question. So relax. I know you were thinking, Paul, are you gonna make me jump the code? No, I'm gonna work this with you. I'm gonna work the steps and then you can answer the question. All right, let's go back to the code. All right, now I want to go to 220.54 because I'm dealing with clothes dryers. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. And so let me get my code where I need to be. Okay, here we are. All right, clothes dryers. Now this is as far as we really need to go because we're only dealing with one clothes dryer. So as far as we need to go in this table. I'll remind you that we do a lot of training that show what happens if you have multi-story buildings and you have to calculate out the dryers. It can get complicated. That's our Fast Tracks program. Our black program is our base program. It's the flagship of our company. Then we have the Plus, which is just access to 12 months of exclusive videos on our website. Okay, so the black is really all you need, but the Plus gives you a little more. Some people are visual learners, so that gives you access to exclusive videos as well. But we'll go into things about dryers and multifamily buildings and multiple dryers for apartments. It can get complicated, but we make it easy for you to understand. Really do. That's what I'm here for. All right, so look right here. 220.54. It says the load for household electric clothes dryers in a dwelling unit, or units, we only have one we're dealing with right here, shall be either 5,000 watts, and obviously you see it says volt amperes. It's synonymous, 5,000 watts or 5,000 VA, or the nameplate rating, whichever is larger for each dryer served. Okay, now we don't even need to use the table because we only have but one, and in the table it says up to 4, it's got to be 100%. So there is no demands. You take it. Now, in our question, it was 5.4, right? So let's go back and look at our question. So there's our question. It was 5.4 kVA and 240 volts, right? So we're trying to get the amps. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, you're one of those astute students, I can tell. And you've gone and you said, well, you know what, Paul? All I'm going to do is use Ohm's law. And I'm going to take the 5.4 and I'm going to divide that by 240. Okay, so 5.4 divided by 240. Okay, but you want to get this into VA. You want to get this into watts. Okay, or it's going to work out funky for you. So 5,400. Okay, and we're going to divide that by 240. And that's 22.5. Okay, 22.5. Well, that's my amps. Is that the answer? No, because we're allowed to apply additional demands to the neutral load. Okay, where do you go to look for that? Let's go to the code real quick. All right, so in the code, when we're looking for neutral calculations and at contributions, we're going to go down to 220.61 right here. And we're going to look and see if we get what's called a permitted reduction. So it's 220.61b. And here's what it says. It says a service or feeder supplying the following loads, that's these loads right here, shall be permitted to have an additional demand factor of 70% applied to the amount in 220.61b1 or a portion of the amount in 220.61b2. All right. Well, we're going to be doing B1 because, as you'll notice right here, electric dryers are in here. So it says a feeder or service supplying household electric ranges, wall-mounted ovens, counter-mounted cooking units, and electric dryers where the maximum unbalanced load has been determined in accordance with Table 220.55 for ranges and Table 220.54 for dryers. Well, we only had one, so that was 5,400. That is our value that we use. So I can take that and I get to apply a 70% additional demand to that. Okay, so let's go back to our screen here. We'll get back to where we're at and we'll see how this applies. All right. So I'm going to show you two methods to do this before we answer this, okay? I'm going to show you on the screen one way to do it, and that is basically once we got down to that 22.5, we apply 70%. I know I said you were going to get to work it. You get to pause it at any time. I get so excited when I'm working these things. I just work that sucker out for you. But let's go on and get it real quick. And we know there's a code references. And there you go. As you can see here, it's simply 5,400 divided by 240 is 22.5. We did that earlier. But we multiply that by 70%, or as I always like to do, I would like to convert this to a decimal. So I take that 70%, go from the right, move it 2 spaces to the left. So it's 0.70. You learn all that kind of stuff in our program. And that means you're working decimal values. Of course, you got a calculator, probably doesn't matter, but what if that calculator went dead? So much easier to work decimals with decimals, right? Anyway, So 22.5 times 70% is 15.75, and that is the actual contribution. Now, since we're dealing with amps, the code does allow you, if it's 0.5 or greater in amps, to round it up to the next available size and use that. But be careful, because if an exam question wants to know the actual contribution, then the more accurate answer would be 15.75. In the real world, 15.75 or rounding it to 16 is going to be fine. Right? You're permitted to round. Not required, you're permitted to round. Now, I want to talk about the other way you could have done this. So one other way you could have done this is start with our full value, our 5,400, right? 5,400, and you could have done what? Multiplied that by 70%. And that gives you 3,780 VA. Then you can take that and divide that by 240 volts. So divide that by 240. And that also gives you 15.75. Always remember, there are many ways that you can do this. And I will remind you also, don't forget, you have what's called Informative Annex D in the back of the code book. So if you ever get stuck on a calculation and you need something to jog the memory, always flip back there, okay? But remember my technique, my 3-wave method. If you haven't watched that video, it's on YouTube. Ask for the 3-wave method, and you'll see how I teach you to go through the questions. We also cover it in our Fast Tracks program in our Wednesday night sessions. That's right. If you become a Fast Track student, you get to come to my live sessions every Wednesday night. Ask any question you want. Break it down, and that's what we do. We dissect tons of questions on that Wednesday night session. Anyway, so one of the things that we're going to do this is make sure that you fully understand how you're breaking these questions down, right? And that's exactly how you do it, okay? All right, you ready for another question? All right, ready to end up on our questions? All right, we're ending on a doozy now, so let's make sure you're all geared up. Remember, you can pause at any time, read this question, pause it, try to answer this question, but I'm going to walk you through it. All right, we have a restaurant contains the following commercial kitchen equipment. There's 2 12 kW ovens. There's 1 10 kW grill. There's 2 8 kW deep fryers. There's 1 1.2 kW disposer, and I'm going to be writing all this down. I have 1 1.5 kW dishwasher. I have 1 10 kW booster heater. And we have 1 4.5 kW water heater. Okay. So how many units we have here? It looks like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Looks like we have a total of 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 9 pieces of kitchen equipment. We have 9. And each one of them have a kW value. The last part of this question wants to know, what is the feeder calculated load in kW for this equipment? Now, remember different terminologies, and we've covered this in other videos. You have what's called a connected load, and you have what's called a calculated load. A calculated load is very similar to when they say, what is demand load? It means that you're implying something's getting added to this, or some kind of demand, or something's being done. There's a calculation to take place. Whereas a connected load is simply adding everything up. And that's the first thing that I want to do. I want to go on and get my total connected load. So I want to add everything up here, okay? So remember, you can pause this at any time, but I'm going to do that first before I even start looking at the code, all right? So I'm going to add up 12 plus 12 plus 10 plus 8 plus 8 plus 1.2 plus 1.5 plus 10 plus 4.5. That gave me 47.2 kW, okay? So at least I know what they're all added up to be, right? So now let's see how we're going to work this in the code, okay? Because that's what we've got. So now we're going to go to the NEC, and we're going to be looking at it. Now remember, we're doing cooking equipment, kitchen equipment, not cooking, kitchen equipment, okay? Obviously some of this does cooking, but kitchen equipment in a commercial setting, it's other than a dwelling, okay? So we're still going to be in the standards, part 3. So let's go look at it. All right, so I'm going to get my code book, and I'm going to get us to where we need to be. there we go, kitchen equipment. Okay. All right. So this is like commercial electric cooking equipment. This is everything that's in like a commercial kitchen. Okay. That's what we're dealing with. So the contribution to the load for this kitchen is what we're working with. All right. So let's read it. It says, it shall be permissible to calculate the load for commercial electric cooking equipment. Okay. So we do have cooking. We have ovens. So we're good there. Dishwasher booster heaters. We do have a booster heater. Water heaters and other kitchen equipment in accordance with table 220.56. It also says these demand factors shall be applied to all equipment that has either thermostatic control, and most of this stuff is the ovens, the grills, the deep fryers, and all that kind of stuff are going to be thermostatic controlled. It says, or intermittent use in as kitchen equipment. Well, obviously, disposal's on when you need it. Water heater is going to come on when it's needed. Booster heater is going to come on when it's needed, but that's also probably thermostatically controlled. So we're good with all these pieces of equipment. We're good. It also says these demand factors shall not apply to space heating, ventilating, or air conditioning equipment. Yeah, because we got our own rules for that. So not going to have anything to do with that. Okay. One of the most important aspects I want you to be aware of is where it says, however. It says, however, in no case shall the feeder or service calculated load be less than the sum of the largest two kitchen equipment loads. Now, in the full calculation, it's probably never going to be, because we haven't even taken the other loads in the building in consideration. But in this question, based on your contribution, you also have to understand that it can't be less. The math we're getting ready to do can't be less than the two largest pieces of equipment. Now, we added everything up, but when you looked at that list again, what was the two largest pieces of equipment? And I'll go back so you can see it. So the two 12 kW ovens were the two largest pieces of equipment here. Now, together, that's 24 kW. So we already know that it can't be less than 24 kW. Right, in our equation. So with that in our pocket, we can look at the questions on the exam, and we know why they're asking this type of question. Is they're trying to suck out that information from us, right? So when we look at this, we're going to say, okay, well, we know that if there's any other questions, multiple choice on there that are less than 24, that we can throw those away. 24 is still on the table. But anything that's less than that, we throw away, because it can't be any less than the two largest pieces of equipment anyway, right? So we got that going for us there, okay? All right, and we're doing a feeder, so that makes sense what we're doing here. We're feeding a panel that's got just these loads in it, maybe, and that's what we're sizing this feeder for. Okay, next thing is we look at it and go, okay, well, we saw that there's a demand table there, and it's talking about calculated. So there's something I need to do. So we're going to go back to the code and see what the code permits us to do. All right, what you see here on the screen is the demand table right here. And we get to apply some demands here, okay? Now, we had 9 units, remember? 9 pieces of equipment. So 6 and over at the bottom says that we do have a multiplier of percentages of 65%. That's what we're going to be using, 65%. Well, there's a reason I made you add up everything up front, because it's always good to have the total connected load. Because when you see some type of calculation, something that says calculated or demand, then you're going to have to apply something to that overall value. That's what we're going to do here. So I get to take that 67.2, and I'm going to multiply that by 0.65, if that's how your calculator works, or you can just do it 67.2 times 65%. Most calculators do it both ways. That gives me 43.68 kW. Well, guess what? Isn't that greater than the 24? How much do you want to bet on an exam? They'll give you 43.68, they'll give you 24, and then they'll give you some other numbers, and they're probably less than 24. So if you get rid of those that are less than 24, you got a 50-50 chance, okay? At least it reduces or increases the likelihood that you got to get the question right? But and I know you know how to calculate it now, right? So we'll go back and look at it and see what we got. There you go, 10. Oh, there's the 12 and the 12. That was the 2 ovens. The 10 was the grill. The 8 was the deep fryer. The 8 was the other deep fryer. 1.2 is disposer. 1.5 was a dishwasher. 10 was the booster. 4.5 was the water heater. That was 67.2. We already did that math, remember? Told you to add them all up. And we get to multiply that by 65%, and that's where we got the 43.68. And that was our answer. And that is the answer to this question, okay? So we kind of walked through it. So at the end of the day, pretty straightforward, but they can be confusing for folks. If you have any trouble understanding those, look, our Fast Tracks program is designed to help you. It is designed to be systematic in how we walk through the code. There's 19 units, and we take you from the very beginning. We work you through branch circuits, calculations, services, optional method, standard method, commercial. We teach you multifamily, and we give you a lot of questions. You get to come to Wednesday night and ask your questions, and we have a great time on Wednesday nights. You get access to the Sparky Hub's Fast Tracks Black or Plus forum, where all of the Fast Track students hang out and post questions and things like that. All of that's included. There is no other program like it out there that teaches you the National Electrical Code. If you're struggling, don't throw your money away on crash courses that are just gonna, you hope that you get by. You don't learn anything, right? Don't buy the books and tons of books that are not going to teach you anything. You're going to end up with more questions than you started out with because they're not designed to support the learning process. I have created a program and we have such success, well over 99% success in passing and learning the NEC. If you follow our program, there's over 1,200 questions. There's databases of questions. There's competency reviews. There's quizzes. Again, Wednesday nights. There's just so much you get with our program. If you look at the price and break it down, I can promise you that I will give you more of my personal time on Wednesday nights that will more than ever pay for consulting with an expert. It is simply something that I like to do on Wednesday nights with the students, is be there to answer your questions. It's not part of the Fast Tracks program. It's something that I like to do for my students. So hopefully you'll join me and you'll get the Fast Tracks program. Hopefully these questions weren't too hard for you. You paused it, go back and work them again. And again, you need any help, I'm always here to help you. Till next time, folks, stay safe. God bless.